Number nine, number nine, number nine, number nine. Made Daily. Hello and welcome to the Made Daily Podcast. I'm John Michael Thomas.
And I'm Pierre Hageman.
Made Daily covers our favorite stories online from tech to social media.
Our expert thoughts and opinions about information security, website design, and development.
And other random stories from across the internet. And this week's episode of the Made Daily Podcast is made possible by Cinemechanics, the premier camera and lens rental house. When you're shooting your next film, commercial, or popular streaming TV series, Cinemechanics will ensure your project stays next level.
And Made Daily version 5, the all-in-one secure website builder with built-in data collection tools and secure customer portals.
And one of our way back internet favorites, Max Headroom. All right, Pierre, our first story is this new email scam, which includes pictures of your house.
Yeah.
And don't fall for it. This came on, let's see, Electronic Frontier Foundation story. And it looks like,
by the way.
Yeah. And it looks like it's exploitation or sexploitation scam that is really prying on your fears and basically giving you a heavily worded, scary email with pictures of your house saying, if you don't comply with my demands, we're going to leak information about you or ruin your reputation or whatever, right? So
yeah,
quite a psychological attempt on people,
right?
In some ways.
Right, because when you so oftentimes they'll include your phone number, your address, and like you were saying, a picture of your house, or maybe even pictures of your family that they pulled from social media. And when you see something like that, it can be very jarring. Like, whoa, how did these people get my phone number? How did they get a picture? They've been to my house, right? But luckily, most of the time they haven't. Most of these scams are kind of they're mass sent generic scams, and they use public information like Google Street View. And I think one thing I don't think people really know how much information is available about you. Like, especially if you own your house, the property tax records have your name. And if you have another person on your deed, it would have their name, and it has all your payment history. So, and then obviously, people post a lot of personal information on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and with a lot of these, the privacy controls aren't obvious, or it's set to more public by default. So it's pretty easy for attackers to kind of scrape this data.
I mean, I think generally assume all of the stuff that you receive is a scam. It's like you don't have to forward the email chain to keep yourself lucky,
Oh, yeah, you're not gonna. Yeah.
It's very unlikely anybody has incriminating information of you. So say, I don't know, say there's something in your like iCloud or something, and you have something you don't want to get out, whatever that might be. It's very unlikely.
Yeah, and this kind of, it's tying. We talked in a previous episode about the AI scams that are trying to trick you and say your family member's in trouble, or they're in jail and need to be bailed out. And so I think this one kind of falls into a similar vein, in that they're gonna have the most success is with older people who don't really necessarily know. And maybe it's not saying, we have compromising photos of you. Maybe it's, we have compromising photos of your kids and you have to pay us, or we're going to release them on the internet, and people, especially older people, can fall for that. So I think, if you have aging relatives, it might be good to kind of tell them about this and say, these things are happening. They're out there. You might get something like this. Don't worry about it. It's not, it's not true. It's all fake.
I mean, so we're looking at the example email or that somebody received, and it's right off the top. I know that calling your phone number or visiting your address will be a convenient way to contact you in case you don't act. Don't even try to escape from this.
Yeah.
You have no idea what I'm capable of in your city or whatever it is. Uh, you know, I think we're kind of past the point though where people kind of know um, that you just got to look out for this stuff. I mean, what they're gonna because they would have had to have really gone a couple steps to actually get your information, putting malware on your machine, getting control of your email, getting control of your iCloud. Like the likelihood of somebody having something is pretty slim.
Yeah, and I mean it is possible, somebody it is possible that somebody can compromise your system and actually collect um, information off of your computer. Um, so what you want to look out for is, or the first thing you could think when you get an email like this is any of this information actually private, right? Like if they send you a medical bill, or if they send you, you know, a utility bill or something that you would not expect to be on the internet, right, through your social media or through, say, like a Google Street View, then it might make sense to start thinking about changing passwords. Although in both of those cases, I would suggest just doing a Google search to see if there's been a breach at any of those, like at a telecom or at a utility or a healthcare company. It's happening all the time, and they're getting these records so they can send those out as evidence of a compromise. I've hacked your systems. Here's all
Mm-hmm.
this information I have in you, but really they got it from a breach from a
Mm-hmm.
healthcare provider or something, right?
I also think you could say generally if somebody's asking you or demanding money from you, um, like we've heard about these things happening by phone where people will call and say, hey, your son has been arrested.
Mm-hmm.
You need to provide X number of dollars to bail him out right now. Okay, well, you also got to factor in like most of the time things are not an immediate emergency. Like they're going to sound scary, but there's always usually a little bit of time. If somebody's demanding money from you, I would be suspicious of it. You also have the fact that, like, if you don't know and you're really concerned, find an attorney to look
Right.
into this stuff for you if you really think it's a legitimate legal issue. But most of the time, it's just somebody trying to scam you.
Yeah, and if you really are worried that somebody has compromising information from your computer, then you know maybe don't keep illegal stuff on your computer. Like,
Yeah, but I'm sure it's mostly people trying to be, think that there's like nude pictures of them on the internet or something like that, or
right.
there's some scare of that, or something to do with a, family member or whatever. Or, like, I mean, again, it's
Yeah, I guess there's a difference between embarrassing and illegal, right? I would say, if you're worried about being embarrassed, then I would err on the side of um, assuming that it's a scam, right? Oh,
yeah.
I took a picture of myself and it was on my phone, and did somebody get this? No, they didn't. They didn't get it. You're fine. Don't worry about it. And then just don't do crime.
Yeah,
Don't do
that's
crime.
right. Don't be a criming crimer.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is also stuff that there is. I mean, cyber crime is a real thing, and if this is somebody stateside doing this sort of thing, it's likely illegal. Um,
Yep.
but again, it's just being on top of things. The scarier thing is the phone scams, where like now we have to remember. Was this something we should actually do a little bit of a story on too? Is like when you, hey, is this John, and you say yes,
Hmm.
and they're sophisticated and they're using your voice prompt for stuff. Again, though, you don't have to have voice prompt on any of your accounts. You don't have to opt in for that service. I think there's some financial institutions that want you to use that. Like I think like some of the stock trading sites ask for voice prompt stuff.
Hmm.
But you don't have to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
usually, so you're talking about like a call, like a forwarding thing where they're, yeah, most of the time, At least the ones that I've encountered, they're asking for like, can you confirm your address? So if if you get a random call for somebody and they say, can you tell me your address, just hang up, right? Don't.
Right.
If you didn't initiate the call and you're getting these sort of security questions, just just hang up. I mean,
I,
everything
I,
is a
I,
scam. Like every
I,
call
I
is a
guess
scam.
here's a really good default. If somebody calls you and you don't recognize the number and you think you wanna answer the phone, you can say, "Who are you with?"
Hmm.
And they should be able to tell you if it's a legitimate thing. And you hang up. You hang up. Then who are you with? What's the number to reach you at? You hang up, and then you dial them or you look them up and you contact them directly if you believe it's some business, some place you're actually doing business with.
Yeah, except for I agree with that, except for the part about getting the number from them because,
Oh, sure,
um,
that's actually true. No, you shouldn't do that.
yeah,
That's actually right. Yeah,
I would Google the number of the business and then call that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's another thing though. If somebody gives you a number, you can go verify the number.
Yeah, though we did talk, I think it was last week, that it's possible to spoof that in a way that they were. I think we talked about that in a previous
Yeah.
episode where they had a Google forum um, phone number that, so when you look it up, it looks like a legitimate Google phone number. Um, so even then, I would never trust a phone number that somebody gave you on the phone. Like, and it's funny. This is similar to when you're thinking about developing web applications. You never trust input coming from an
Hmm.
external source. Always validate your inputs, right? So if somebody's giving you the phone number, don't trust that it's real. If somebody calls you saying they're from Microsoft, don't believe them. They're not, right? If you didn't call and request a specific callback, then they won't call you. And I know we talk about this all the time, but people keep falling for it. So
So
I'll
let
say
me
it
restate.
again.
Yeah,
It's not real.
let me restate that though. If someone calls you and you think they may have legitimate purpose for you, ask them who they're with,
Right.
and then hang up. And then you can do due diligence by, I do bank with this provider. You can call them and you can talk to somebody, a manager or supervisor, and find out why someone was calling you.
Yeah, and you know how when you call the bank, they they ask you for security questions. Maybe you can kind of switch that around. So what I get,
Hmm.
I'll get calls from like the doctor, and they'll say, hey, we have a test result for your child. Would you like to hear about it? And um, if they're going to ask me to verify information, I'll ask them to verify information too. Okay, who was the doctor I saw, right? And what was the date of the appointment? And if they won't answer that, then I won't answer, and you can always get that information other ways, right? You don't have to rely on that one phone call.
Right. That's good. That's a good one. We're in a suspicious time frame.
Ugh,
Got to
yeah.
be suspicious of everything. Okay. Next topic. Let's talk a little bit about no code app development. It's a growing, I guess, way to build apps. And there's a few programs that software you can use to build a no code app. No code, for anybody who doesn't know what no code is, it's usually using software to do things that you previously would have to do by coding every line of an application. So you typically drag and drop. It's got a lot of flexibility with features built in. And I guess our opinion, or Pierre, maybe my opinion is a little different than yours. I think this is fine for small scale applications that need to address very specific needs. Maybe you have a map you need to do for your business. You've got a lot of locations. You want a fun interactive map.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have different information on those map items, or some other things. But when you get into something a little bit more advanced, these can be actually very problematic, very difficult to use. Um, there's things like data migration hurdles, and then you're relying on a proprietary node code system, which has these significant barriers. And I would also just say that it's a little different if you're using this to like power a website. That's different than like something you're trying to get people to download on your phone.
Right, website isn't an app, so like using like a
Sure.
CMS isn't
Yeah.
gonna be I wouldn't consider that a no code app
Right.
builder.
I think that that's a good distinction though, that there's no code website builders. An app is like something that's usually specific to the data it needs to display. And oftentimes it's accessed via a mobile device, um, often. So what are some of the risks, that you have without proper safeguards? You can have exposures to your business, especially when handling sensitive or confidential information.
Yeah, so I well, one point of clarification I think is there's no such thing as a no code app, right? So these builders, it's not no code, it's code that you don't control. It's code that you don't control and probably don't understand, right? So that I think is a really important thing to keep in mind is there is code, you just can't see it or control it.
So,
And
so an
that's,
example,
go ahead.
just an example of that would be you drug in a bunch of form fields, name, address, a pull down menu. There's still code
Yeah,
for that element that's on the page.
right.
You just aren't seeing it.
Right, and all the logic behind the scenes, say you want to take that form field and then store it in a database and then present it on the screen, right? That's all code. And so I think the important thing to remember is that that is where you always run into all the problems, is that it's not no code, it's code you don't control. And so I would draw the line at for these builders, I think they're good for prototyping, right? Say you want to have a proof of concept of an idea
Exactly.
that you have, and it's like, and you say you want to take it to an investor or take it to a developer, and say, hey, here's this idea, and isn't it cool, right? Then sure, go ahead. I think though, if if it's anything that you're serious about and you want to deploy to an actual app store, then probably is probably not going to be the best bet. A lot of people, especially developers who we've talked to, find that as soon as you try to scale something or go beyond very, very limited logic, like data flows within the app, that you start running into a lot of problems. They don't scale well. If you go outside of what they expect you to do, it just doesn't work at all, and you can't access the code underneath. And if you can, they might export the code for you, and you can get a project file out of there, but oftentimes the code that's generated is quite bad, right? It's not well formatted. It's not, because they're using these generic components that are getting plugged together to build these apps. And a lot of times, what gets generated would never even be accepted by, say, the Apple App
Mm.
Store for release. So that's, I think that causes a lot of issues with using these tools.
Hmm. So they have their place, and they're handy when you need them.
Yeah, I think if you plan to and build something real, then it can be a really good jumpstart platform. But if you're saying I'm going to use this to get started and then I'm just going to take it and fix it up so that I can deploy it, that almost never works, right? Unless for very simple use cases. But if you're doing anything complicated, you're just going to end up having to rewrite it from scratch anyway. So then you'd be better off just doing that or hiring a developer from the beginning.
Yeah. And we're talking again about like real apps. There are lots of things you might do to like use automation platforms to generate like, follow ups from emails and things. Those aren't this.
Right.
Those are a different thing. So I mean, so this is like, they're things that you're going to probably build a business on, that you just have to be careful of. And so the thing is, if you get to the point where you have to use this, great. But the other thing you might want to do is maybe look for development shops who work with startups,
Yeah.
or will work with you, or maybe, be a partner in your idea. um, because from our experience, I think one of the biggest things is, like, if you're going to start a business that's built on an app, you need to think long term about the fact that you are starting a technology company, and that technology needs to be a significant part of what you're doing with your business. And I think a lot of people think because it's code, or we can use AI, or we can do this stuff, we're going to get there fast. But they grossly misunderestimate the maintenance,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
ability to have
yeah.
to keep the software updated so that it stays secure.
Right.
And that this is things that you need: the right server infrastructure, the right code base, you need the people who understand security, you need all of these things. And there are places you can partner with for this stuff.
Hmm.
But you can't just assume, like, oh, I know nothing about coding, so I'm going to use no code, and that's going to be my ticket to, like, the best app ever. It's going to be a
Yeah.
problem.
I think another thing to think about too is, does your idea really need to be an app, right? If you're just building an app, like say you're running a company and you want people to download your app to learn about your products, or interact with your company in some way, um, probably just build a website for that, right? It's easier. There's a lot more tools available, and so you're not going to
Hmm.
run into these issues. And because really, unless you have a very compelling reason for people to download your app, they're just not going to. Like, people, they just won't.
And there are also, I guess it's a middleware, maybe for lack of a better way to describe it, like where you can wrap a web application and deploy it to Android or iOS, and it's just wrapping your website, which
Yeah,
isn't
that's not
always the
it's not
best.
really a um, middleware, but yeah, there are tools you can use to do that. But in that case, just I would say again, just don't unless you have a need for something that's native only, like you need to use the accelerometer, or you need to use
There you go.
um,
Yep.
you know
Yep.
something like that, then you might need to have an app.
Yeah.
But for just even just geolocation, chances are you don't actually need the native tools for that. You can use generic geolocation to get a good enough um, location for your web app.
And if you have a no code app idea out there and you want to run it by us, you know how to get in touch with us.
Or if if you've used the no code
No
app
code. Mhm.
successfully and deployed like a full scale production app, I'd like to see it, because the stuff that I've seen doesn't doesn't seem to work too well. So if you have the counterpoint, drop a comment. It'd be awesome. Love to see it.
And one thing we were looking at was this, coding with D is her
Yeah.
YouTube, and she's talking about how she lost a lot of money and fell into the trap with no code. And I think that's part of, just a process. We always want to make the thing, a little upfront planning and doing a little budget, or talking to some experts. People will talk to you about your app or give you their opinions way long before you need to get it done. And you can mock this stuff up with just prototyping tools too. Okay, Pierre. Now let's talk about Max Headroom.
Yeah.
So I don't know if people know Max Headroom. I think that I must have saw this on MTV as a kid, and I was like, what the heck is this? I guess in some ways he was the first computer generated TV presenter,
Yeah.
but the fake is that he actually was a real person that was pretending to be a computer generated person, which I'm just, I didn't know that. I thought, I was like, what the heck is this? But the guy, Mac, Frewer was a Canadian actor, and he would put on a prosthetics and plastic suit. And then they would do editing with CGI effects, and he always had kind of like a blue screen and kind of crazy backgrounds and stuff. 1980s, he was like going off of like a TV host. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I loved Max Headroom. There was a full-on TV show with Max Headroom and that Australian guy who was in Eureka and I think a couple other things. But yeah, he was like a detective show. It was great. I loved it. I like Max Headroom.
It debuted in British Cyberpunk TV in 1985, and it was a music video host and primetime drama character, pop culture icon. And if you gotta go look at some of these old like clips and stuff, and there's some behind the scenes too. But it's also kind of funny, like, and it's referenced in Back to the Future. There's a guy, I think he actually might be in Back to the Future on like some of the future TV screens in the episode 2.
Or like the or the Ronald Reagan waiter from the 80s cafe in Back to the Future. Yeah, that's a good one.
This would be a funny thing. We talked a couple episodes ago about we were predicting the branded content. This would be a great thing. Create a character for your brand that can, talk to, and even if it is just a guy in CG,
it's better. Better to use a person in CG than to use AI. That's in my opinion.
So since Max Headroom, we've had like the band Gorillaz, who was all animated, and we've had there's been like Daft Punk, who wear those robotic suits. There's always kind of these characters. This has kind of been a thing, but
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a remake of Max Headroom coming up. Maybe there's already one in the works. I don't know, but they're remaking everything else. They remade Transformers and He-Man. My kids are watching She-Ra. Like, it's like, wow, the 80s are back, but worse, and better in some ways.
And one last thing that's fun to go check out is the Max Headroom interview when he came on to the Dave Letterman show, and Dave talked to the TV, which is quite a funny little interview. They did it live, I believe. So super funny.
This time it'll definitely be John Oliver who's interviewing the new Max Headroom. Right. He's always doing stuff like that.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Thanks for joining us today. And if you want to check out any of the stories or topics we covered, head over to maydaily.com/blog. And if you have a story you'd like to share or a site you'd like reviewed, please leave us a comment.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Until next time,
stay secure.
Made Daily.